watching. I appreciate it. This is Rebekah Tolin, I think one of the best occupational therapists that we work with. She's really wonderful with the children, with the families, and she really gets what the kids need. And it's a really beautiful relationship because she's so good at what she does. I have such respect for her. So Rebekah Tolin.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to Sarah and to Sunnyside for having me. I'm also recording this video, so if you have anyone that isn't able to be here that wants to hear this, it'll be available later. If for some reason you don't want your voice to be recorded or you don't want to be in the video, I think right now only right here is in the video, so you're all safe unless you disclose information that you don't want out there. So I just wanted to let you know about that. Also, in case your body needs a little bit of wiggling, because I'm an OT, there's a basket of fidgets. So if you need something to hold or squeeze or play with while you're listening, we encourage that, and you're allowed to touch and squeeze any of these. I'll pass them around. So if you need them, they're here. Okay, so I wanted to talk today about interoception. Interoception is all of those internal feelings inside your body that give you information about where I am in space, what does it feel like when my bladder is full, what does it feel like if I'm hungry, if I'm anxious, what is that feeling, and how this can relate to OT and how this can relate in the classroom. So I'm hoping to kind of walk you through some of the things that I was thinking about in relation to this for about 20-30 minutes, and then hopefully we can also have 20-30 minutes of discussion. And as you're thinking about things that might come up about your own children or questions about yourself, your spouse, people in your family, on page 4, there's a space here that you can write down any questions or thoughts that you have, and then we can go over anything that you want. So I gave you this handout. It's in the back of, if you have a stapled one, it's not part of the staples, it's behind that. This is from Kelly Mahler's program about interoception. She is also an OT, and she's kind of considered the guru of interoception right now. This is one of the handouts that I just felt like was really clear and parent-friendly. And if you're kind of thinking about interoception after this talk as you go back into your life with your children, this might be a good guide to think about some things. Okay, so external signals into your body might be things like pain, touch, temperature, things like that that are giving you information about the inside of your body. You also might have things going on the inside of your body that are giving you information as well, right? Is my bladder full? Am I having anxiety about speaking in front of people? Am I stressed about something? Is my heart rate fast? All of those kinds of things are those internal signals. So both of those can be construed as interoception. The vagus nerve is really closely linked to interoception. So this is your 10th cranial nerve that starts in your brain and then comes out into your body. And it has a lot of receptors in a lot of your body. So it goes through your viscera, through some of your organs, and connects to your heart, your lungs, your digestive system, things like that. When I was doing some research just about this talk and thinking about things I wanted to share with you about that, I found this statistic that there's over 100,000 different neurons that one particular nerve is connected to in your body. So that's a lot of information that you're receiving just from this one cranial nerve. It's really fascinating, and you can do a deeper dive, but because this is a general overview, I didn't want to get into it that much. But when you have some reactions, and I'm going to talk about this later a little bit about emotions, like fight or flight responses, when everybody knows that kid that kind of goes from 0 to 60 really fast, right? Or maybe you have that kid, I don't know. When you see that reaction, the fight or flight instant reaction, what this cranial nerve can do is kind of calm down some of those reactions or some of those experiences that you're having in your body. So if a car comes very close to you and you suddenly have a reaction that you think, oh my gosh, I'm about to be hit by a car, your heart is going to race, your lungs are going to speed up, your breathing is going to go faster. and then you realize, oh, okay, the car just passed by, I'm safe again, then you can use that to calm down again. You can decrease your own heart rate, you can decrease your breathing, you can tell yourself that you're safe. But sometimes our kids have that reaction and then they don't have that feeling of safety, so it takes longer, or it is more of an extreme for them. So the vagus nerve can regulate the bodily functions for the rest and digest parasympathetic nervous system. So when you're having this fight or flight, it can calm it back down to rest and then digest. So a lot of gastrointestinal links to this vagus nerve. So things about, am I full, am I thirsty, am I hungry, all that GI stuff is linked to this too, so that's all interoception also. Also, immune responses and inflammation can be linked to this nerve and interoception. Some kids will have a fever and you will have no idea because they're acting exactly the same. Some kids are really super sensitive and they'll have a tiny little low-grade fever and then they're acting really differently, right? Because they're getting more information and more impact than a typical kid. So then the next thing I wanted to talk about was general body awareness. So I had this meditation teacher a few years ago who talked about a really heightened sense of body awareness. And what he was working on for years was not just upon awakening being aware of himself, but being aware if he was awakening on an inhale or an exhale, right? So that's a really heightened example of body awareness that you can have with your own interoception. Obviously, preschoolers are not going to be that sophisticated, but there are kids, you know, the clumsy child who's always bumping into things or always kind of checking their body into walls or counters or different things. I'm not talking about a 12 to 18-month-old that's learning how to walk, but I'm talking about a 4-year-old that's seeking out crashing and bumping and more information about where their body is in space. Also, the messy child might have a decreased awareness of their own body. So you can see that when they're eating, the food is all over their face. When they come home, there's ketchup and stuff all over their shirt. Their awareness of it being on their face or them being messy, or the art project, staying on the art project, isn't there as much as for other kids. Then there also might be ones that go the other way. They don't ever want to be messy. They don't want one little drop of water on their skin. They don't want any paint touching them, right? So there's both extremes. You want to be somewhere in the middle, of course, with all of this, but everybody has their different sensory differences. And then our job as OTs is just to help kind of normalize some of that. So a lot of times when we're working on interoception with small children, I will give them cues because they're not getting their own cues about what's happening inside their body. And sometimes a visual cue is a really helpful tool. So I'll have kids that are standing there like this, and I'll say, do you need to use the potty? And they'll say no. And I'll say, but look at your legs. And then they look down and they are shocked to find out that they were actually squeezing. So sometimes that visual cue really helps them be aware. Another thing that I do a lot, and I put a little icon here so that when you go home and explain it to somebody else, it'll make sense, is potty training, right? So potty training is a big part of interoception with preschoolers and something that we're trying to help them get more awareness with. There's a spot right here. Yeah. Here's another one. Yeah, sure. So one thing I like to do a lot with potty training in particular is I will say, so kids often, especially ones that are really rambunctious and really fired up about playing and doing what we're doing, don't want to stop to use the bathroom, but you can tell that there's cues that they need to go. So I will use this visual and I will say, okay, inside your body, there's something like a balloon. It's called your bladder. And your bladder gets full like this when you really have to go pee. And then when you go to the bathroom and you let all the pee out, it goes all the way down like this. And then slowly over time, as you drink water and your body digests everything, it starts filling up and it starts filling up and then it gets full again. So where is your bladder now? Because if you say, do you need to pee, yes or no, it's a binary question and they will say no, right? But if you can give them this cue, then they can say, oh, okay, I think it's about here. And then I say, oh, okay, so when it gets to about here, maybe we'll try to go. Or they'll say, okay, it's not this, but maybe it's here, which usually means it is this. But if you have this cue for them, it really seems to help. And so then they'll go to the bathroom and come back, and I'll say, oh, you took care of your body. That was so smart. You're acting like a big kid right now. I'm so proud of you. It's all the way down to here. And it's not a judgment call. It's not about, if you're good or bad because you went to the potty or you didn't. Everybody's body fills up slowly and then, needs to go and does this all day long. So you can use yourself as a model too and say, okay, so right now I think your bladder is probably about here, and in 5 minutes it's going to be here, and then we're going to need to go. Right now mine is kind of about here, so I'm going to wait 10 more minutes and then I'm going to go, whatever it is, right? So you can just have that conversation with them. Other ways to cue them into things that might be happening in their body is to tell them to look for a flushed face, or sweating, a high heart rate, a high breathing level, or even clothing twisted on their body. So often there's kids who their body awareness is decreased and they're learning toileting, and then you notice that their underwear and their pants are all bunched up, and it's probably been that way for 3 hours and they didn't have the awareness of it, right? So looking down and seeing, is your waistband flat against your body? Are your clothes twisted? Sometimes that visual cue helps them have more information about what it's feeling like. And then, this profile of kind of the messy child, or the child that doesn't have as great of body awareness, also sometimes has trouble with wiping because they're not feeling if it's clean or not. So they're just, of course, every young child has to learn this anyway, and it's just talking about the extremes. But, a visual cue. So if you take your toilet paper and then you look at it, you can see, is it clean or not, right? So there's your visual cue. I also have a child who I had the parents put a full-length mirror in front of the toilet so that he could go and then he could check, and, he could have that awareness of what was happening back there. So things like increasing the awareness really help with bowel and bladder control. So I've had many Sunnyside Preschool students who, we work on crawling through a tunnel so that they're on their belly in prone, crawling, so that they're getting all this information about, where are my intestines, where is my stomach, where are my genitals, what is that sensation like, and increase that awareness so that they can have more control over bowel and bladder and hunger and thirst too. I had one kid who, so we have this swing called the mushroom swing. It comes down like this and it has a big kind of ball thing, and then you sit on it and squeeze it and straddle it. Sometimes it's on a zip line and sometimes we shake you, but you really have to squeeze. You have to use a lot of core, and then you're getting a lot of input to, your genitals as well. That swing helped this child become toilet trained when she was in this kind of cycle of constipation and then miralax and then leaking and then this, whole thing that can happen. So it was kind of magic. Once she started getting more activities in prone, even laying over different swings or laying over the back of the couch and doing things where she was laying on her belly, all that awareness kind of kicked in, and then she was able to be toilet trained. Sometimes, like in that scenario, if you have the cycle of constipation and then it hurts, and then when I go to the bathroom it hurts, then it can be really tricky to kind of break out of that cycle, because they end up withholding because they don't want to go, because then it hurts, and then the more they withhold, the more it hurts, and then there's the miralax thing that starts, and then it can kind of be a tough cycle. So that's the extreme of that, but it's all kind of linked together with what all those feelings are like inside your body. Let's move on to page 2. So then also hunger and thirst. Feeling full is part of interoception, knowing when to shut off, how much you're eating, and knowing what that feeling is like of I've had enough and now I'm full. sometimes that's really tricky, either under or over, right? So kids that say that they're full after one bite, and you know that can't be true, and then kids that eat all of their food and then want their siblings' food too, and then you know that that's too much. So sometimes, even as adults, we will use food, withholding food or extra food as a regulation strategy. We'll use the act of eating or the act of sucking on something or chewing on something to keep our body regulated. And then that, of course, impacts the interoception feeling of thirst and hunger that's happening at the same time. With adults, it's really interesting right now, especially maybe in Los Angeles, that there's, this increase in Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound and these different kinds of medications, which part of why they work is because it tells your body that you're feeling full and that you don't need to eat more, and that it's giving the same signals that your interoception should be giving you anyway, but in a heightened way. And so it's just interesting to kind of think about how those things are affecting this topic, I think. Okay, so then with the parasympathetic system, we're also thinking about heart rate and breathing. One thing I like to use a lot is this little guy, this is a portable pulse ox. I'm sure if you've been in a hospital, you've seen them. They go on your finger and they tell you what your oxygen saturation rate is. But also this tells you what your heart rate is. And it's, pretty easy to use with a kid. So you can put your finger in here, you can see how many beats per minute you have, and then you can have them run around the room and see how it's changed. And then see if they can sit down, calm down their breathing, and see how it changes again. So if they are a child that's constantly hyperventilating and constantly on the move, like those kids that are going really fast and breathing like that, and they don't realize that they need to slow down their breathing, this can be a really useful tool to see how it changes over time. So I like using that tool a lot. Fatigue is another thing, sometimes, especially think about if you have a child and you're taking them to another country on a plane and they have jet lag when they arrive. They might not understand the concept of jet lag yet, right? But they have this fatigue. And, sometimes they act like little frat boys, right? Where you think like, okay, you just need to rest. And they're like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. I'm all right. I can push through. And they're not realizing that they're really actually fatigued and they need to take a nap or take a rest or whatever it is, or that their body clock is not caught up with them yet. Temperature is another one, so you get signals about, I have a fever, so I know what that feels like now because I've had fevers my whole life, but maybe if I'm, 2 or 3 years old, I haven't had too many fevers, I know that something's wrong, but I can't really articulate what it is, and I don't know that it's that I have a temperature. So obviously, we can check their temperature and tell them, oh, this is what's happening, you have 100.4, and that's why you feel this way. And so, we have these tools with a visual, but also the explanation of what that is. And then pain. I put this pain score in here for you, understanding pain levels, because, this is all usually posted in hospitals, and it's because this pain score is still the most accurate way to tell how much pain somebody is in, is by actually asking them on the pain score. So often, with preschool students, if you say, how much pain are you in? It's the worst pain ever, every time, right? So if we have a scale, and I like to start small with maybe just 2 or 3 variations, so is this a 0? Is it a 5? Is it a 10, right? 10 is the worst pain you've ever had. Remember that time that your brother, shut your finger in the door? That's a 10. So what is this bruise? Okay, it's a 1, right? Or it's low. And then slowly as they mature, you can increase the variance so that you're saying, okay, what's a 3 versus a 4? What's a 7 versus an 8? How much pain is it? And this idea carries over into emotional content too, because I like to use size of the problem a lot with this age group. So how much pain are you in? How bad do you need to use the restroom? How big is your problem? Are all ways that you can grade how much information they're receiving and how much communication they're giving you. So size of the problem I like a lot, because if your friend says they don't want to play with you, that can't be a 10 out of 10. If, there's a fire next to the house is also a 10 out of 10, right? So we have to be able to grade these things too. So if we're playing a game, we're playing Go Fish, and I get 4 matches and you get 3, I think that's a pretty little problem. So therefore, it warrants a pretty small reaction. So that's a constant conversation that I have in my practice with a lot of kids that are working on winning and losing, tolerating frustration, things like that. Then we have touch. So even an itch is part of your interoception and this sense of knowing what's happening inside your body. Some people, just a light touch is actually really painful, and they really resist it and don't like it. Some people, they can take really intense touch and it feels really light to them. So it's just, again, kind of a gradient on what your own sensory differences are. And then, sexual arousal. So even in young children, this applies too, because some kids will, get dressed and then that feels kind of good, and then there's a whole big reaction. Or, there's not any later on. So that's also related to all these feelings inside your body. Then on page 3, we have emotions. I put all your inside out characters, well, not all, I put several inside out characters here. Thank goodness for this movie, because it gave some faces to being able to describe a lot of different emotions. And I have some children, especially some autistic children, that really like these characters because they can pinpoint their feelings. So how this gets more convoluted is because if I have a feeling in my body where my heart rate is elevated, my stomach feels kind of funny, it could be a lot of things. It could be anxiety, it could be hunger, it could be excitement, and how do I differentiate what it is and then be able to articulate it, right? So if I think that I'm hungry every time I'm uncomfortable and I'm always asking for more food or something to drink or whatever that is, then that can be a cue to us, okay, you're actually not hungry, you're actually anxious. And then we can have a conversation about what that looks like. Or, if I know that every time I walk into my new kindergarten classroom, I have this feeling, and it's because mommy's gonna leave and everybody's new, right? That's a normal feeling to have, but what does it feel like in your body? What does anxiety feel like? Or what does anticipation feel like? Even more subtle, different variations. Some children can have difficulty noticing when they're ramping up, and some kids can go 0 to 60 really, really fast. So what was the trigger? If they're at 60 and they just got to 60, we're seeing this much of the iceberg, right? So what was all this underneath that led up to that 60 that we're seeing? Was it that, Dad is traveling, and I didn't get enough sleep, and I didn't eat enough this morning, and someone just took the toy I wanted? All those things might be that part that we're not seeing underneath that leads up to it. So slowing it down and trying to tease it apart is a big part of my job with these kids. With regulation, we often talk, there's another OT that talks about the zones of regulation, and they are linked to different colors, kind of like a traffic light, where red is, stop, out of control, things are, beyond your capability to handle them, you might need an adult. A yellow is kind of caution, slow down, whoa, things are getting a little bit crazy, you might be starting to, react to your peers or having some kind of difficulty in your classroom. And then green is this alert, ready to learn, regulated state. So what do those different variations feel like? When you're starting to ramp up, when your sibling is really bothering you, when your mom told you it was time to go to bed, but you don't want to go to bed, and now you want to do all the things and run all around. What is that like? What zone are you in? How do you have that conversation with your child? So those are different things. I wanted to show you really quickly this video. I have permission to show it. If you know this family, obviously please keep it confidential. I wanted to show you this video just so that we could have more of a discussion about what regulation looks like and what tools we use both in our relationship with our children and also in sensory means. What tools are we using to calm down? I will tell you that this family, I had taught them this strategy of deep breathing called dolphin breaths, which some of you already know, I think, too. So we breathe in like this, and then we breathe out our spout. Okay, so we have a big motion, and then also the deep breath at the same time. So I want to show you this so you can just see. This is right after a big meltdown where this child was physically out of control and needing adult help to calm down. So this is Dad with him. Oh, sorry.
I like to imagine the spout. Spouting. Your hands look like they're in control. Is that true? Okay.
And do you really like that? Because it's here.
Okay, so here's what we're going to remember.
Okay. So this just gives you a little brief example of what was happening. So you can see he's sitting in Dad's lap, right? So, you know, it had been a meltdown to the point where he was in danger of hurting himself or breaking things. So Dad was holding him. So Dad's body was calming down the child's body because he was using his own breath against the back. So his breath through his chest to the breath of the child in the back. So he could feel his own breathing, but also feel his dad behind him. He's doing this strategy. We're using the visual to say, look at your hands. It looks like they're in control again. Okay, now look at your feet. They're in control again. Now I can let go of your feet. You know, we're just getting back into being in control again. Okay, and then another thing I just wanted to touch on with communication is when you have a very young child, like a baby, or you have a non-speaking person, like an autistic person, how do you communicate about interoception with someone that can't tell you verbally, right? If I can't say, you know, my diaper is wet, or I can't tell you, you know, I don't like this game because I'm a non-speaking person, then what happens, right? So then there's other cues we have to look for. So obviously, if you have a baby that's wet and they're crying, you're going to check all of the things. But what you're checking, you're giving them information about what's happening inside their body, right? And so a lot of children, young children, preschool children, even into elementary school, are still really working on regulation through the mouth. And that's kind of because in these early stages, you feel uncomfortable, right? You're either hungry or thirsty or you're wet or you need your parents. So you're uncomfortable, so you cry. Someone puts something amazing in your mouth and then you feel better. And so we get this strategy of learning that that's the thing that's going to help us feel better. So, you know, there's parents that I've worked with that say, my child is 5, they're still using a passy, what can I do about it, right? And it's because this regulation strategy just kind of kept going and we didn't have other alternatives. Or, you know, they're chewing on their shirt all the time, or they're putting non-food objects in their mouth, or, you know, they're eating a lot or they're not eating enough. All of these things can kind of be all linked together. And then sleep. So many families really struggle with sleep, especially in this age group. You know, some things to think about with this is how is the child starting out their night? How are they going to sleep? What are the regulation strategies they're using? Is it because mom or dad is next to them and providing that physical contact and that deep breathing and the, you know, shutting down of the other systems? The parent is turning off the light, the parent sings the song and then is quiet, whatever it is, right? Is it because of that person? Is it because of the sensory environment? Do they need blackout shades? Do they need a little tent over their bed? Do they need to feel more enclosed? Do they need to feel more space? Do they need a heavier blanket, a lighter, you know, all those sensory things are a huge factor with sleep. And then how to wind down, right? So if you have these feelings about anxiety and thinking about the next day and excitement about the field trip, and how do you shut those things down too? How do you tell your body to tell your brain to shut those things down? take deep breaths, think about other things, maybe not read the news. I know I can't read the news and go right to sleep. So we have to teach our young kids how to do that too. And then in the classroom, there's different strategies for regulation. Here, you know, there's a schedule. There's potty breaks at the same time every day, and everybody goes. So not only are you having the social aspect of seeing your friends go sit on the potty or go use the potty, but your body is learning that at 10 a.m. every day, that's when we go potty. This is a wiggle cushion. I just brought it to show you. So sometimes kids that need that little extra movement, that have trouble sitting still in circle time, or later in elementary school, they're getting up and moving around. You put this on their chair, and it has air inside, and they get a little bit of extra wiggle, and it allows them to focus and stay listening. Sometimes a movement break is necessary. I had this one child at another school that I told, when you really need a movement break, you can get up and ask to use the restroom. And his teacher said, I think maybe this child has a UTI because he's going to the bathroom like every 15 minutes. So we had to revise that strategy. But sometimes you just need to get up and move your body, right? Yoga, tools for the mouth, fidgets like that basket, different stories about what your day is going to be like, what things you can access. So sometimes, you know, we just have to look at the specific child in the specific class and see what things are out of whack, and then see if we can provide some alternatives to help them. I'm sure you know, if you've been at Sunnyside a while, you've seen some children that have a necklace with a Chewy on it, and we use that a lot as an alternative to putting all the toys in your mouth or using your pacifier or whatever it is, right? And then therapists like OTs and speech therapists and social skills therapists can also come on campus and intervene in real time with the child in their environment. So one great asset to Sunnyside is how collaborative that process is here. And so I've worked with a lot of students here on campus working on these things, because why would they come to my office and work on things one-on-one with me when the issue that they're having is with their peers in their classroom? So if I can come in where, you know, no one is necessarily even aware that I'm there for that one specific child, but if I'm there and we can work on some of these peer relationships, or identifying how you're ramping up, or, you know, social skills and communication related to frustration, regulation, all of these things, it really helps to be in the classroom to do that. So that is the majority of what I wanted to tell you about interoception. I'm sure you have questions and things that you want to discuss, so let me know how I can answer your questions.
So what do you do if we use deep breathing a lot for calming down, going to sleep, and all that stuff? And when she's calm, she loves it. She loves deep breathing. When she's upset, she doesn't want to deep breathe. And if I'm holding her to try to keep her from hitting me or getting physically aggressive, and I try to deep breathe without saying anything to her, and she feels me breathe, she knows that we can stop deep breathing and help when she doesn't do it. But how does that, what do you do for that?
So then what happens is the question. So she's not upset right now, right? Eventually you got out of it. So what was the thing that changed it? Because sometimes there are kids that honestly almost need that release of the cortisol, of the stress hormone, to kind of break through it and then be able to be calm and regulated again to use the strategy. Another thing is that deep breathing can't always be the thing. We have to have a whole toolbox of different things, that being one of them, right? And the resistance might also be coming from feeling like, I don't know that I want to be back in control and out of this feeling, right? So what is the feeling serving, right? If the feeling is coming from, I don't want to clean up right now, and you can kind of head off that at the pass by saying, oh, you know what I think? I wonder if it's because you don't want to clean up right now. Then she feels heard, and she feels like, yeah, that's exactly it. And then sometimes it's appropriate, not every time, because you don't want a tantrum to get the thing that they want, but sometimes it's appropriate to then say, did you need 1 more minute to clean up, or did you need my help to help you clean up? The thing that happens in my office is a lot is I have a timer, and the timer goes off, and that means it's time to go. So some kids hear the timer and they instantly go into this thing of, oh no, I didn't do all the things, and I wanted to do that swing and I didn't play that game, and so then it ramps them up and they start running around and trying to do all the things even though they were told to, go choose a prize and get your shoes. So then I'll say, wait a minute, in your body is what's happening that your body is telling you that you have to do all the things one more time? And then if I got it right, then they'll say, yeah, that is what's happening. And then I can say, oh, well, remember, today's not your last day. Do you want me to write down that game so we do that next time for sure? You know what I mean? So then they have that chance to know that they're not losing out. Sometimes also if they have to go to the bathroom, I'll say, I'm going to pause everything. I'm not going to touch anything. I'm not going to play without you. I'm not going to do anything. Everything is stopped. You go potty, you come back. It's going to be exactly the same when you get back. Then that feeling of missing out doesn't affect them going. Yeah. Yeah.
My son is like 22 months.
Okay.
Possibly not talking about me, so he can't like verbalize.
Yeah.
How do you know when they're starting to signal that they want to start potty training? We're noticing sometimes when he like moves to like kind of pull on his diaper or he'll move into like a different area to do it. What are if someone's like not normal yet?
Yeah.
Is there a way to feel like it's going time to feel like go too fast or
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like are there some signals like that?
Yeah, I love that question. So I always say that if there's indications, I would just talk about it like it's no big deal. Like this, oh, maybe you're pooping. Awesome. Pooping's great, and then just let it go. Or if they always go hide in one little corner, then maybe that's the corner where the little portable potty goes. And even if they're pooping in their pull-up, maybe they're sitting on the potty in that corner, you know what I mean? And then you slowly move the potty to the other place. So some kids have a rigidity about how they go to the bathroom. So I'll only go in a pull-up, or I'll only go in the living room, or I have one child who will only go outside because that's where the dogs go. So you're not going to go from only outside where the dogs go without wiping to then like toilet, adult toilet, right? That's too much of a jump. So let's start, putting a little potty outside and going there, and then wiping and doing it outside, and then slowly moving it inside. Or if you'll only go in a pull-up, put your pull-up on, go in the bathroom, poop in your pull-up, and then take it off in the bathroom because the bathroom is where we go to the bathroom. Those kinds of things, So with someone who is not really verbalizing it yet, if they're doing, this, or they're scrunching down, or they're straining, I would just keep saying, oh, you're pooping, great, Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're going to need it eventually anyway. I also like those little toilets that have the legs that pop out that you could stick in a bag that goes in your car so that when you're needing it wherever you are, and you don't want to go in that nasty public restroom in the park or whatever, you have that with you. And then that's always the same wherever you go. Disneyland, in your car, whatever. They don't let you bring it in Disneyland, though. Don't do that. I can't believe they checked that, but okay.
Kind of on the flip side, my daughter can, at the point where she tells us like constantly, say, like go to the kitchen or whatever, and she like goes to the corner. She kind of has all the signs, she's ready, but we're also kind of letting her lead. But how do I know when I need to kind of who's ready, like without kind of forcing her. You know what I mean? So I feel like
Yeah.
like only holding her back with herself for fear, maybe.
So if ultimately what you want is her going on the big toilet in the bathroom, then you kind of have to think about the dots that you want to connect between where you are now and where you're going. So some kids, I'll have there's special books, or there's the iPad, or there's some fun thing to play with, but you only get to play with it when you're in the bathroom sitting on the toilet. It lives in the shelf above the toilet, for example, right? That's the fun thing that happens. If you go in the living room on your little potty, no big deal, but those things are the fun things in the bathroom. So there's a carrot, but there's not a stick, you know what I mean? So it's not pressure not to, but it's incentive to. Yeah. Yeah.
So piggybacking off that, my daughter's in that like constipation whole thing. She's been like a whole saga the last few months, but she definitely is like aware when she's going. I'm just curious, like, what are some other tools we can teach her to like not be so scared to go, like at home? Because that's like, I think it's still in the back of her mind a little bit, where kind of questing out of it, but we haven't fully like
so to speak. Yeah, I think it's all the things that we know as adults, right? We have to drink enough water, we have to eat enough fiber, we have to not eat all the carbs. I mean, I don't know, sometimes there's also food restrictions or picky eating that's all linked together too. I don't know if that's your situation, but often that is with a lot of kids I work with. They like the starchy things and not the fruits and vegetables, you know. So I would just nonchalantly keep talking about it as related to diet too. And then I would just keep trying to move her body a lot, get a lot of awareness and, you know, bowel, bladder, stomach, genitals, all of that. So lots of activities where she's lying in prone. So you can color while you're laying on the floor, right? You can lay over a couch to watch a show or, you know, check something out, a book or something while you're on your belly. You know, lots of like commando crawling on the floor, things like that. Maybe a gymnastics class, swimming, martial arts, all those body awareness kind of activities I think are really helpful. Those are my three favorites for body awareness is gymnastics, swim, and martial arts. There's lots of different things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Our biggest problem that we have with her from going from 0 to 60 is like the tiny baby transitions, like getting out of the sleep diaper and then into underwear, getting out of her pajamas and into the clothes. It's like getting out of the house and into the car. It's these tiny little transitions in where like everything is fine, and then it's like, you know, and I give her time to use a timer. You know, I'm like, okay, you're coming to 10 minutes. Okay, now we're going, and you have 5 minutes. Like, what are you? And you just like nothing seems like nothing helps. Sometimes I can bribe her, but I also with food. But I don't want to
make that.
I don't want to equate doing things with food. I just feel like in the long run that's probably not healthy.
Yeah. So do you have a visual schedule? Like, we go in the car, we go to preschool, we come home, we put on the PJs, we go to bed, you know what I mean? Because that could help. You could take actual pictures of her with your phone and then print out each picture of each thing and then put it on a visual schedule like a whiteboard or the fridge or something, right? And then it's the weekend, so we're gonna see grandma or something. So we have, you know, wake up, put on your clothes, grandma, you know, PJs, that whatever. And then you're gonna bounce it back to her as much as possible. So where are we on the schedule right now, sweetie? Oh, we're here? Right, what's next? I forgot. Oh yeah, we're gonna put on our regular clothes. Okay, what time do we do that? When do we do that? Oh, right, it's now. Let's do it, you know? So now she feels like she's driving the bus and she's more in control. You were in control the whole time because you made this whole plan, but she feels like she's the one in control. I call it the illusion of control. It's not, do you want to get dressed or not? It's, do you want the blue shirt or the red shirt, right? So it's that with the schedule. So then nothing is unanticipated because it's all expected. And so that happens here too, and that's going to happen in kindergarten also. Like we have, you know, morning meeting, then we have snack, then we have recess, you know, so you know what's coming. I think it depends on the age. Yeah, well, you just told me where your stumbling blocks are the transitions. So the getting dressed should be a picture. If breakfast is not a problem, leave that one out. If getting in the car is a problem, put that one on, right? So all the things that, you know, where you're getting stuck. I would try that. Did I answer your question? Okay. Yeah, and then, you know, it's the more simple, the younger the child, the more immature the child, the more simple you're going to make this. I mean, if you saw my Google Calendar, you would see a more sophisticated thing than what I'm explaining, but I think that's really helpful. And you could even have her take them off or check them off. You know, there's little things you can get on Amazon where you slide the check mark from X to green, you know, it's very satisfying. Or you can print it out and laminate it and write it every time with a whiteboard eraser or marker, you know? Yeah. Yeah.
How much of this is like the part of childhood? And like, I mean that, and I don't mean that in like the, this is, you know, my kid, you know, has had stuff, and I've noticed as she's gotten older, some of the stuff persists, and some of the stuff has faded. And I'm curious, what are some of these that you're like, this is not just a point of childhood up to a point, and then most people meet in the middle, and some of this continues beyond this as part of personality, and obviously, I know it's not a simple answer, but as my daughter's gotten older, I've seen her change and overcome some, and some have been persistent. So I'm just curious if whether these are like, hey, if you notice this now, it's going to be her.
Yeah. Well, you are lucky that you're in a school that knows what those benchmarks should be, and when children are falling outside of those benchmarks, they indicate to you that help is needed at that point, right? Not every school is like that. Not every school will do that. So that's an amazing thing. I think we can all think about our children and say, well, when he was 18 months, he was doing this. And, you know, I have a 14-year-old. Now that he's 14, he's still doing this, but in this way. But then this other thing went away. And we could all think about that in ourselves, too. There were things that I was doing when I was 5 that I'm probably still doing now. And then other things change over time. So, for example, your vestibular system, your sense of movement, changes over time. That's why you don't really see a lot of 90-year-olds on roller coasters. You see a lot of 20-year-olds on roller coasters. So I used to love roller coasters. I don't really like them anymore because those cells change over time and they die off, and you don't have the same experience of that. Things like toilet training, I mean, I assume that all of us here now are probably all toilet trained at this point, but at some point, none of us were, right? So we've all achieved that, maybe at different times, and, you know, there are certain preschools that will say, you know, we can't accept your child unless they're toilet trained. They don't do that here, luckily. You know, and then there's different, I have a 15-year-old client right now who is wearing pull-ups. So it just depends. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we all have our sensory challenges and we all have our sensory preferences. And I think some of that is genetic and some of that comes when we're born and that's how we're going to be. And then some of that can change, as you know, with your own child. So when it's really affecting different aspects of your life, at home, at school, with your family, with peers, that's usually when the intervention is indicated. So we have a lot of students here who are 4, who are struggling with handwriting and fine motor skills, and they need OT for that. Some kids that are having trouble with peer relationships and sitting in circle time and participating in the group, and they might need a different kind of intervention for that. You know, communication skills also, maybe some of the bowel and bladder stuff if it's a general body awareness issue. But it's just, you know, there's a big range of within normal limits. And then when it's outside of that, that's when the therapists are called in.
My daughter's 25, and when she was like, Europe, and like her shirt was like really wet, like right here, so wet. What's going on? And I realized, she's like chewing on her shirt, so I was anxiety. So I put her in a V-neck shirt, and then she couldn't go into that. Then she found her sleeves, and then she found her hair, and you know, I realized she got some anxiety, you know, and that was kind of her way that she was kind of working through that. So me taking the shirt and all these different things away, what she was telling me is like, no, I got some anxiety, I got to figure this out. She could get a scrunchier hair or whatever it was. And, she kind of worked through all of that. Like, if you had met me there, you would have no idea, but like, I still see there's a little bit of anxiety in her from time to time. She, has a master's, works in a great job, but I can tell there's like little quirks in her that I see from time to time where she kind of needs things a little bit a certain way and causes her anxiety if it's not. So I think there's always a little, like she's outgrown so much of that, but I think what you're asking is like, there's different things, like she's still a little slow to warm up, and that's okay. I don't say she's shy, she needs a second. She was that kid that I would always get to the class 10 or 15 minutes earlier because she needed that time to kind of get comfortable and feel her groove, and then she was great. I walked into a class and sat down and she couldn't do that. She still needs a little bit of time and knows that. It's just, if you're on time, you're late, you're always early. So I think someone that always just kind of like pushes a little bit. Not that she's an amazing person, and that's part of her journey. But I think the little things that you're seeing, yes, they kind of change and they kind of go out of stuff. But I think there's always like a little sprinkle because that's who just makes you are. Does that kind of make sense a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know that this is like, you want to, right? You want to be having, and I'm going to see someone so close up. So I can see the way she was with the baby.
Right.
Similar to how she's
Right.
close up now.
Absolutely. And as she grows, turns into a young woman, there's different things that you're like, oh, you just kind of, but it's nice kind of knowing all this because I just feel like having this information is so important to kind of like, I'm a teacher, I know all this, but like she's coming home and obviously having a lot of anxiety throughout the day, and not realizing that's kind of how she, so yeah.
And I always say that everybody has something. Every child has something. If you have a 4-year-old and you think that they are perfect in every way and they don't have anything, just wait, because your thing is coming. It's going to show up in middle school or high school or college or marriage, I don't know. But everybody has something. And so if we can see it earlier and provide the scaffolding to help them as early as possible, the more likely that part is going to dissipate and they will be more successful.
Giving her that time before our class started, made her feel comfortable. I knew as a parent she needed that. And just allowing that time is super important. You really know your kids and you hear them, and it's also like, why do you, I'm not that way, why are you this way? You know what I mean? It's just like, taking yourself out of the mix, it's also really yeah.
Many years older than him.
Yeah.
So I sometimes a lot of students will hear about like asking about feelings of the person, not, but also with the
Right.
so how do you balance it?
So like,
about anxiety.
right, so a great way, like with kids, is like, let's make a picture, let's talk about our feelings. Like kids are so into like, missing mommy or daddy, where they're missing, let's make a picture for mom. And that's really how, like, it's so therapeutic for children. So like planting, digging in dirt, talking about their feelings, drawing things, you'd be amazed at like just how much just comes out, just being like quiet in the car driving carpool, you know what I mean? Just like listening to everything. And then kind of going back to that and, revisiting. Like I'm a big believer in revisiting things, even if things have been great, and like just really going back and talking about it. So modeling that, like, I always tell parents too, like, oh, Julie, I had this really hard meeting I went into, I was feeling so anxious and nervous about it. Like, that's okay to say. We want our children to know that we also struggle with different things. It's hard for me to walk into a meeting that I'm 5 minutes late for. Of course I'm going to feel awful. And it's really important that we model that behavior. And we also talk about our feelings, to your spouse, your partner, anyone around there. And even be amazed, even like 3 and 4-year-olds, we need to talk about it. Just very much on their level, but they really get it. They really, really do. So yeah, I think ours is a great kind of avenue to talk about feelings and all things.
And sometimes you're very different in your own family. I have one child right now. His mom and his dad are very different from each other. Mom is very structured, likes things very clean and orderly and calm and peaceful. Dad is boisterous and rambunctious and wild, and the child is just like dad. And mom will say, I don't understand. Is he like this? I'm not like this, but he's like this. And so, you know, you may want a child that puts everything away and is quiet and peaceful and demure like you were, but that's not the child you have. What the child you have is a wild, you know, he's going to be mountain biking off a mountain, or he's going to be inventing something amazing with all the things he knows how to connect. He's not going to be you, but we can celebrate who he is that's very different from you, right? But sometimes when they are different from you and you just don't understand why they're not like you, it's really frustrating. But I think honoring that too, and then trying to find the way, I always talk about it at like scaffolding, trying to find the scaffolding to put underneath them to give them the tools that they need. A big piece with kids with ADHD is executive functioning. So executive functioning is also those things about planning and sequencing and organizing. And you can see those things kind of coming online with 2 and 3 and 4-year-olds too, right? But then as you get older, you need more sophistication as your brain develops in those areas. So when you're 4, sequencing, okay, I'm gonna put this magnetile here and then this one here, and then it's gonna be a castle, right? But I'm not gonna make it too high because then it's gonna fall down. That's what they're doing all day long. But then when you're 9 and you're in 4th grade and you have to write an essay, you need an intro and a body and a conclusion. And then in high school, okay, well, I have an assignment due in 3 days and another test in 5 days. How much do I need to study tonight? What do I need to prioritize? It's different levels of executive functioning. But if you are putting those concepts in place now, then you have more success later. So things like the visual schedule, or things like, you know, I really like how you built that tower. That one is really different than the one you built last week. I can see that you added more triangles. That's so cool, right? So then you're just supporting them in expanding what they're able to do in that way. And the frustration too. Hey, remember yesterday when we had so much trouble getting in the car? Today you got in and you were so calm. I love that. Makes me so happy. I didn't have to raise my voice. I feel so happy with you. You know, and then you're just reinforcing with your relationship too.
You can say, I'm feeling really frustrated because of all these things. You're allowed to. Absolutely.
Definitely. I don't know what to do. We're going to be late and you're not doing the thing. Yeah.
They'll tell you, they'll say right back to you, I'm really frustrated too. That's always great when that happens.
Yeah. Or you tell them to ask for consent constantly about their bodies, and then they say, don't change my diaper, this is my body. And you're like, oh, that's not the part I was talking about though. Yeah. Parenting's not for the weak. Any other final thoughts in our last 1 minute? It's your chance. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope you learned